Well, folks, welcome to Saving Miller. We decided to take a road trip and show you what Arizona is really like. I think it's a bit different than people really think. So, we'll give you some shots of some different places that we see along the way. We're going to kind of a remote location. I think a lot of people picture Arizona like this, a flat, open desert, lots of rocks and cactus and short trees, and that is pretty typical of the Sonoran Desert. So, this is, in general, the part of the desert that Phoenix is in, which is the metro area that we live close to. It is pretty hot, it is pretty dry, and a large part of Arizona does look like this. And in the springtime, you can see quite a few flowers. The desert really, if it gets enough water, is quite beautiful in the spring. The mesquite trees and the palo verdes typically have yellow flowers, and then those mature into the beans that they see later on in the year. About July usually is when those start maturing and dropping. There are a lot of native grasses that are sort of annual grasses, and they'll pop up. They're already dry here. You can see them interspersed amongst the cactus and the small trees. And these grasses actually are highly nutritious, and so a lot of the cattle that graze in Arizona do eat these grasses. Here you see a little palo verde tree. There's a couple of overall varieties of trees, basically the mesquite, like the dark bark you see in the distance there, and then the palo verde that we just looked at. There's also a huge variety of cactus, and a lot of these cactus will bloom throughout the year as well, depending on the seasons, what type they are. And of course the famous prickly pear cactus grows in these areas as well. So going from the desert, the flat desert, heading up into the mountains, the terrain changes pretty significantly. This is not Sedona, but there's a lot of areas of Arizona that are like this with these red rocks. And then as we get a little bit higher, we start to lose the cactus, and we get to these higher elevations where there's a lot of open meadows. It's still pretty dry, but it's not desert dry. So the trees change a little bit. You start seeing junipers, and the oaks start to appear at these higher elevations. The grasses change as well. There's a lot more grass. It's a lot healthier. These are mostly gamma grasses. And then I think you might be surprised to find out there are more canyons in the state than just the Grand Canyon. Of course, that's the famous one. But I've got some shots coming up here of the Salt River Canyon. Quite a beautiful canyon, and the Salt River is in the bottom of it. It's pretty big. It's a little hard to capture the size of the whole thing, but you can see the river way down there. And most of this area is completely undeveloped except for the highway that goes through it. And so it's a really unique part of the country. It's sort of surrounded by these higher flatlands, and then you'll be going along, and then just suddenly things change and you have a canyon. So here's a closer look that will kind of give you an idea of what the scale is. This canyon is quite large, and this is the opposite end of what we were looking at earlier. Stretches for miles, and this river flows all the way to Phoenix, and it is a pretty good sized river. You can see it down there in the bottom. After we leave the grasslands of the high desert, then we get even higher and up into the mountains, and we start having these mountain meadows and a lot more water. The snow melt and some rainfall, especially thunderstorms during the summer, create quite a few small ponds and lakes in these alpine regions and support a much denser pine forest. Primarily up here we have Ponderosa pines, but there are also other trees like oaks and things like that. Now, here in the distance, out there in the meadow, is a herd of elk. There's about 50 of them, and there are a lot of elk in Arizona. Colorado and Wyoming get a lot of attention, but here they are, middle of the day, just out there grazing. I think there are about 50 of them, and they're just out in the open. So, kind of gives you an idea of what the elk habitat looks like and where they like to hang out. This is a big open valley close to the town of Alpine, which was basically our destination on the far eastern side of Arizona. And the elevation, like I said, is about 8,000 feet, so there's still a little bit of snow up there in those high areas. Now, they're right where I'm pointing there. There's a couple of elk out there grazing. These are a bit closer than the others we were looking at, so I wanted to get another shot, and we'll zoom in here so we can see what through most of the year you can see elk in these high alpine regions, and then during the winter the snow kind of pushes them around a little bit sometimes, so they may move closer to town or to a ranch that has hay or something like that. They're pretty adaptable. And yes, a lot of Arizona is desert, but we do have a lot of streams and rivers, like the Salt River. And here's a little stream that flows year round, comes from a spring, and especially early in the spring, I guess we're in the middle of spring at this point. We have the summer grasses growing, and the trees are, starting to leaf out for the deciduous trees. And so at this time, it was 105 degrees in Phoenix, and up here in the mountains, it's in the high 70s. So really a nice, refreshing time to get away from the city. And the mini farmer and her friend got a chance to play in the creek. So we had a really nice time. But there are many, many places like this in Arizona, and we do enjoy getting out to see the variety that we have. I really love the desert. I love the Grand Canyon, but I want to give you guys a picture of what some of the rest of Arizona looks like when you get away from the well-known places. So this is part of the Coconino Forest. It is a very large Ponderosa pine forest. So the pines that you see here are part of that. And all through it, there are these little creeks, these little ecosystems that exist that support the wildlife, like the deer and the elk that we saw, as well as quite a variety of other animals. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little look at some of the more interesting places of Arizona. Until next week, Saving Miller out.